As usual, everybody, we are the Trebled folks. I am Sid,
And this is Kit.
and we are joined today by Phil.
Hello.
Phil, what's up, buddy?
Yeah, what's up,
I'm
dude?
doing fantastic. How are you?
I am great, actually. We actually been talking a little bit right before we recorded, and Phil does a lot of really cool stuff with music. Now, he's had 3 albums come out. That is Breaking the Stratosphere in 2018, Resonate in 2021, and most recently Ascension in 2023. I think you wanted to talk about Ascension a lot, didn't you, Phil?
Just because that's the most recent one, but if you want to start from the beginning of Stratosphere, I honestly don't mind. I'm free to talk about any of them.
Yeah, you can give us the full breakdown if you like.
Sure, okay. What do you want to know?
Yeah, well, let's start with first and foremost, what's your musical story? How did you get from being born to releasing music? Like,
I like that.
When did you first fall in love with music?
I think the first time I ever fell in love with music was probably around the time, I know this sounds stupid, but when I was about, I don't know, probably 5 or 6, and Wayne's World came out, that movie, and that part when they're all listening to Bohemian Rhapsody in the car, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is something incredibly fun, and I didn't really understand it, but I just knew that I enjoyed it. And my parents had Bohemian Rhapsody on a vinyl, and I was just thinking, the thing with the guitars in it and all the crazy vocals, like, I love this. This is great. I didn't understand it, but I know that I understand it in a weird sort of way, and like I was trying to learn like things on like an old keyboard in the house, and like, oh, when I press things on this key they go higher, and when I press the ones on the left they go lower, and I was like trying like work things out. And then it wasn't until I was about 12, 13, 14, my parents had this idea that I could either learn an instrument over the holiday or I could go on holiday, like vacation. And my friend at the time was thinking like, oh dude, if you get a bass, I'll get a guitar, and we can get in a band, and we'll get like, oh, it'll be cool. And I'd be like, okay. And it came to this thing of like, you know what? I'm actually going to get the guitar. It looks cooler. And it wasn't until like 12 years later that my friend actually got a guitar and gave up. So I'm actually kind of glad I went with that decision. And excuse me.
You know what? I hate to interrupt you. Before you get into influences, I forgot that. So we did a thing last episode where Kit guessed some influences on the band, and I'd like to do the same with you. Just guess some influences and see if I'm right.
Okay.
So most of all, in your guitar, I hear from least to most, I hear a little bit of Paul Gilbert. I hear some John Petrucci, Dream Theater leads, and I hear most of all, Surfing with the Alien, Time Machine, Crystal Planet era Satch.
Absolutely correct.
Really?
Oh my god. Oh,
nice. Okay. Whew. And then in composition wise, I kept beating my head trying to figure out what exactly sounds so familiar about your work, and I realized you sound a lot like Devin Townsend. More specifically, albums like Infinity, Synkestra, Key, Transcendence, Empath, Addicted. I'm assuming I'm not wrong and you're a big fan of Devin Townsend.
Big fan. But I think like I'm inspired by a lot of stuff, not just Devon, but also I know this sounds weird, but I also like a lot of Disney and soundtracks and video game soundtracks, and also a lot of like classical stuff like Stravinsky and Tchaikovsky and Vivaldi. And one that I've always been really influenced by is a band called Rhapsody. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I think I've heard of them. I haven't listened to them though, as far as I know.
They construct themselves as cinematic metal, and a lot of this stuff is in Italian, and this stuff it's bonkers. It's like if you were allowed to make like the most bombastic sort of movie trailer metal, and all the songs are absolutely ridiculous, and I love every single one of them. And I'm always trying to approach that idea of like walls of sound and space, but I also a lot of influence of stuff of growing up with stage musicals, Broadway stuff, stuff from the 60s, like the Beach Boys, like how they would like really experimental, Frank Zappa,
I love
all that
Zappa.
sort of stuff. Zappa's crazy. He was crazy.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say Disney or more theatrical things, specifically certain moments in your music, especially towards the middle end of Shapes of Kindness. There's this I don't know how to describe it, but there's this thing you go into, and I was me and Kit were listening to it, and I was like, dude, this is like sounds straight out of like a Disney movie.
I kind of had this idea for that song in particular about like how there's a moment in the film, a film that I deeply love called The Dark Crystal. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I love The Dark Crystal.
Oh, yes. There's a part where they talk about, like, they taught me the shapes of kindness, and I think that was relatively a metaphor on, like, what do acts of kindness look like if you were to draw them, like hugging, listening, understanding, and how that's sort of like a novelty in these nowadays of actually being able to show compassion and how important it is to foster joy and less cynicism in people. And that part in the song, which goes very musical and sort of theatrical, is sort of like the tortured part of all of ourselves, where it's like we look at ourselves with the reflection of understanding that we're broken and that we need to self-reflect in order to feel something. And then it's that second part that ramps up again, saying like, find your inner light, which is just saying that like, you're stronger, like I said, you're stronger than you know. And then it's this thing of just like motivating you to get back to the idea of like showing compassion again. So I think, what's the best way to illustrate that? And I was like, I know, musicals. And I was like, because what's the rule if you can't?
It's gotta be, right?
Like if you can't speak it, you sing it. And if you can't sing it, you play it. And I was thinking that's the only way I could sort of illustrate that point.
Definitely, that's great. Yeah, I love that song. That let all souls collide.
And doing like the things with like the harmonies, and I was like, how do I represent the idea of like souls colliding from like a point of being like not cosmological, because I don't like the idea of collision being a point of violence where like you're clashing, but it's a way of like saying that our souls meld. I was like, that doesn't work. But like collision was like the only way to sort of centrifuge it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
My writing process is so bizarre.
Yeah.
I thought like, I'll learn an instrument over a summer instead of going on holiday. And I ended up having like a Fender Squier beginner kit, and it was one of those like the tiny beginner amp, and it comes with a VHS tape on how to play chords and all this other stuff. And the stuff I was learning at the time was just like the stuff I was listening to. So weirdly, and I still like these bands now, but I used to listen to Green Day and Nirvana and The Strokes and My Chemical Romance and just stuff like that. Like, I think it's because I was like 14, 15, and we all go through that, what I call mad at my dad phase, and then my friend showed me like Iron Maiden and Metallica, and I was like, holy crap, what is all this stuff? And all the crazy elaborate guitar work and the melodies. And this was also around the time I was getting into video game music, like Mega Man and Nintendo stuff, and just being like those strong melodies. And I was listening to Metallica once, and I was telling my friend, I was like, who taught this guy to play? And he was like, I think it's some guy named Joey something. And I was like, Joey something. And I ended up like Googling it for ages, and it's like, Joe Satriani. And I managed to burn myself this little disc of just sample tracks, because it was just like things that came from a magazine I had in a guitar magazine, just like sample tracks of stuff. And Surfing with the Alien was on there. And I remember I went into art class. I will never forget this moment for as long as I live. I was in my art class in school, and I was drawing anime figures, because that's what you do as a nerd. And I had my little Sony Walkman headphones on, and I was just listening to Surfing with the Alien, just thinking like, this isn't like music I've ever heard, and I'm probably never going to again. Yeah. So I'm going to absorb everything that this track is trying to say without any words. And that's when I realized from a really young age that you can tell a really complex statement without any words. You can understand the emotion and the intention through just the instrument, and just these noises and these techniques that I had never heard before. And like, this was in 87. I wasn't born for another 2 years, and this guy's already out here like redefining like what an instrument is. And that's when I got into Steve Vai and Yngwie Malmsteen and Eric Johnson and Neil Zaza, Paul Gilbert, Michelangelo Badio, Marty Friedman, Jason Becker, like all the virtuosic people that are just like, they're all brilliant in what they do, but they're all distinct and different. So I sort of like I've always been sort of like a sponge for information, of just like absorbing everything that I've listened to until you're just overflowing with ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
So I got into Steve Vai's practice regime where I'd learn like 10 hours a day. And it was ridiculous. I used to, I'd just be sat on my bed with guitar in one hand, and I'd have like food in the other, and I'd be doing like legato exercises with like a sandwich in one hand and like just trying to play stuff.
Yeah.
And then I thought, like, my dad was like, you should actually have lessons. You should actually go and see someone so you can learn all this stuff. Because I used to play stuff for my dad, and he like didn't get it. I'd be learning some crazy Jason Becker piece with all these like harmonized sweep arpeggios, and I'd make one mistake, and he'd be like, oh, I want to work on that, and then he would just walk away. And that was like a really sort of like a disciplinary thing for me, of just being like, right, be better, okay. And like, he was never like strict or anything. My dad is like the most chilled guy you'll ever meet, but his thing was like, oh, you made a mistake there, work on that. And he would just like walk away, and that was my thing of like, okay, don't make that mistake again. And then it was all these other things. Like when I was in school, there was a band that my friend was in, and they used to do all the punk stuff, and they used to smash all their instruments up, and of course they'd get a gig, and then they were fucked then because they had nothing to play with.
There you go.
And then I was in the music room once. It is a consequence of being rebellious, yes. And then I remember once it was lunchtime, and it was just, the music room was just empty, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to play in here. No one's going to bug me. I'm not bothering anyone. And I was just like playing like Steve Vai licks, like For the Love of God and Passion and Warfare stuff, and all these, Cliffs of Dover. And I was probably about 15 at the time, and I love it so much. And I turned around, and there were literally about 15, 16 other people just watching me, and like 2 other teachers, and wow. I had no idea how long they were standing there for, and they just turned around. They were like, "Oh my god, Phil can play guitar! What?" And I turned around, and I was just full of tears, and just like I had to run to the bathroom and just start puking, because I had like no way to like how to counter this. So I could have just been like, "Yeah, I play guitar, so what?" But my brain was just thinking like, everyone knows this, like not this secret that I have, but like this is something personal to me that like was only for me, and now people that have no idea what I do know this now, and it's like, shit, what do I do? And I used to do talent shows in college and stuff, and it was funny because I used to be in IT, and I'd just be playing guitar with my friends and stuff, and I used to bring my guitar in for break, and people didn't really pay attention to me. I was just in the corner just doing programming and stuff, and we had a talent show once, and my friend was like, oh, my guitar's broken, can anyone else fill this gap? And I was like, I can play something. And I literally played Surfing with the Alien, because I knew that song inside out by then.
Wow.
And it was funny because no one in the college had any idea that I was going to go on stage. So when I came off doing all the crazy like whammy bar stuff and the pick tapping and all the crazy wah noises, I came off and people were like bowing to me and holding doors open for me like, dude, we had no idea. Dude. Yeah. And I would never forget that. Just like, it's like being a superhero in a way, and everyone knows your secret identity.
They could tell you actually practiced. They could tell you actually cared about it more than just a hobby, which I'm assuming most people around you at the time did.
No, they didn't even know it was a hobby. They just thought I just sat in the corner and just played PlayStation. They were like, oh, you like your nerdy things, you like Harry Potter and Transformers.
So you surprised
and I was like,
them.
I haven't seen
That was kind of like
your
superhero moment.
It was, because they were just like, we didn't know Phil even played music. We didn't know he even had a guitar. And it was just like, well, yeah, I've been playing for like 5 years at this point.
Surprise!
Exactly.
That is excellent, yeah.
And then at around 2012, I was thinking like I should start writing my own stuff. I've done enough covers, and I've been on YouTube for since I was about 19. I've been on YouTube a long time.
Really? Would you like to plug your channel while you're here?
It's just called AstraVex, ASTRAVEX.
All right, sweet. Shameless plug. Thank you.
Yay! And I got like 8,000 subs. It's like my channel's pretty much dead, but sometimes I'll do something and it'll surprise me like how many views it gets. I'll do something and they'll get like 12 views, and then sometimes I'll review a guitar or something, it gets like 120,000 views, and I'm like,
super inconsistent sometimes with that.
Very,
how that works.
very.
I've watched your channel a little bit.
And, thank you.
You've posted like gear reviews. You've posted what was your most recent thing? Was Nirvana cover? Was it?
No, Nickelback.
Yeah.
I've committed a deadly sin.
We have a man of taste over here, is what I'm hearing.
I knew it was an in band. I couldn't remember exactly which one.
I just like the idea of that song, and I was like, you know what? I haven't done anything down tuned on my new Harley Benton guitar, and I was like, well, because it's a 7-string song. I was like, I don't have a 7-string, and I was thinking I'm just gonna play it in drop B, and I'm just gonna see what comes out. And I thought it was a fun party song, and it's surprisingly like how it's flown up. Like yesterday it was at 80 views and now it's on like nearly 300 views. And I'm like,
Really?
I guess
Wow,
because
that's
it's Nirvana
awesome.
and it's popular and it's quick, it's fine. But yeah, like I was saying, 2012, I started thinking I should write my own stuff. So I used to have this low laptop and I used to do things in PowerTab. Have you ever used, you two guys ever used that?
Yeah, is that, if I'm remembering correctly, is that where you can create tabs?
Yeah, it's like, and like Guitar Pro. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Or
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so I used to do all my stuff in that, and I was thinking like I used to spend like days, weeks working on stuff that no one else was ever gonna see, and then a bunch of stuff happened where I moved house, and it was like, oh, I got my own place now. This is great. I can actually, I'm not going to disturb people. I can record stuff and get my own software and actually facilitate the ideas I got, and it turned into this thing where I got like really obsessed with breaking the stratosphere. Like from 2012 to like 2017, 18, like I worked on it for a long time because I didn't know how to do anything. I had to learn everything from scratch. I did an audio engineering course and I had to learn everything from that and how to different kinds of software and different interfaces and just how to mix and engineer and master. And then things kept constantly changing. And then it was an idea of like, oh, what is this album about actually? And I was like, I have no friggin' idea. And I kept explaining it to people. It's like, oh, look, how many songs are you doing? And I was like, I've done 24. And he was like, you should cut that down. That's way too many. And I'm like, you're right. I'll work them onto other things or just abandon them. And yeah, so the first album took about 5 years to do. But now my process has become a bit more refined and I can understand what I need to facilitate and write. So yeah, I guess you could say that my journey of going from being born to making an album was all rooted in, as my friends always says, you just panic and do it, don't you, Phil? And I'm like, fuck yeah. Just panic and just do it. That's the only way I get to making anything.
That's good advice. Panic and do it, yeah.
Question about that, actually. Do you think that applying pressure to yourself in those scenarios helps you put out better material?
I don't think it makes me do better material, but I will. And I think this is true for everything. I think we all have days where we just think like, "Oh, I want to write a song about this. Oh, I want to record something today," and then it turns into like, you know what? I should finish that Netflix series, and I was gonna see my friend today, and I was gonna go to the movies, and then you have to like sort of like discipline yourself of just like, if you don't do this, no one is gonna do it, and it's never gonna get done. It's like when I was working on my second album, Ascension, I wrote most of it primarily in COVID. And I was just thinking, like, I'm on my own, I'm isolated, no one's going to miss the fact that I'm not doing anything. But I'm just thinking, like, if you lose this idea, you're going to be kicking yourself a few years just thinking like, oh, what could that song have been? What could have that process have been? Because to me, it's not just so much the output of the song, like, oh, I'm done with the song, look what I've done. It's more the process. I enjoy the process of experimenting and getting lost in like, oh, what if I add this? And what if I tweak this? And oh, what if we add strings to this? And what if there's a choir? And, and then it turns into this whole, well, you've heard it. What is this craziness? And so I think the idea of applying pressure to yourself can work for some people. Like I have some friends who are like, oh, we're gonna write a song and we're gonna do an album in a day, and I'm just thinking like, is that healthy? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it really varies from musician to musician, artist to artist. Because I've had phases in my life where one way of getting the product will work for a time period, but then I have to swap up the approach because eventually I get burnt out on, whether it's pushing myself or being super lax. Eventually I have to change it up. So I don't know if you ever have any experience with that where maybe you have to go at it from a different approach, or have you just always done it the same way?
I think my process of making music itself is always there. Like I'm always working on something. I have terabytes of stuff that no one listens to or ever hears, just me. But when it comes to YouTube, I realized that like getting out of that rat game early was healthy because there was I will admit, and this isn't something I'm proud of, I used to be a Let's Player,
Oh, yeah.
Well, hang on a second. I dabble in a Let's Play every now and then.
But I ran full bore at it. I went 4 videos a day on a less than stellar PC where it would take like 8 hours to render a video and hopefully it wouldn't blue screen in the middle of the night. And, it was killing me because it was like I had no time to do anything else because all the Let's Play stuff on YouTube was just draining me. I'd be falling asleep in the middle of the day, and like my girlfriend and my friends and family, and it was like scheduling time for people like, oh, I'm doing 3 videos today, so if I decide to do 6 videos today, I'll free up Saturday so I can go to the movies with my girlfriend and I can do this, this, and this. And then like, I'd be falling asleep in class and I'd be like, I can't keep this up. And then you realize that people on YouTube have like editors and like a whole team of people helping them, and I'm just like, shit, I don't have that. So that, aligned with endlessly making music and experimenting and stuff and doing videos and trying to have a social life, I was just thinking, this is not healthy. But my approach to making music is just like endless. My brain does not shut up ever, and I wish it did. Right. I don't know if it's something to do with I don't think I've ever mentioned this in any of our conversations in the past, but I've got something called chromesthesia.
Okay. Well, tell us about that.
If you're comfortable.
If you're comfortable.
Of course, it's nothing bad. It's basically I relate sounds to colors and shapes. So the way that I write is conducive to visual stimuli, in the sense of what I'm writing has a tone that only I can see, and when I hear other things, they have a color. Like right now, both of your voices are both very red and green. And I know that sounds bizarre to hear, but that's what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm seeing.
Which one's red and which one's green?
Yours is red.
Okay, far out.
And yeah, that's right. But the way that I write is like, do these colors mesh together? Do these moods and these fabrications of the visual in my mind work with what I'm doing? It's like when I'm in Reaper, all the layers and tracks all have to be the right colors. So like, bass is green, drums are yellow, guitars are this, and it's like I have like 250 tracks sometimes, and they all have to be distinct. It's like looking at a rainbow every time I open my computer.
Yeah.
So I think it's to do with the process of that. When my mind is just constantly, like right now, there's music in my head right now as we're talking, just like arpeggiated sequence and things atonal, and it's just everything, and it doesn't shut up. But it's
I know exactly what you mean by that. I really do. Now I suck at capturing what goes on in my head, but if I tune into it, there's always something going on. I know exactly what you mean by that.
Like I've never had a quiet. I've never just had a moment in my brain that's just like beep. Never. And sometimes I find myself waking up in the middle of the night. I think there's one song on the new album on Ascension, "The Devil's Town."
Yeah. The how's it go?
Like that really sort of like jazzy Disney villain sort of song.
Yeah.
So,
I like that one.
That came to me in a dream, and then I literally woke up at 3 a.m, grabbed my phone, and just sort of hummed the melody into my phone so I didn't lose it. And as I was listening, I was thinking like fire and trains and like some sort of like vaudevillian top hat like devil guy, and I was just like, I can't lose this. So I instead of just like, I was like, I'm gonna record on my phone, and I literally just like jumped on my computer at 3 a.m, just started like just noting it all out, like what's the tempo, it's in a blues shuffle, and then it's in this thing, and it needs this sort of arrangement, and then it was like, okay, I got it. So it does suck in a way, because it's like I wish I could have quiet time and just let my brain chill, but at the same time it's the case of if it's like it's always there and it's never gonna go away. I'm gonna be 102 and I'll be still like this. It does work in my favor. That's a very good way to think of it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean it does. I mean, you make excellent music. So
well, thank you. That's very nice.
If that is a representation of what is going on in your head, then that, I mean,
beautiful.
I'm sure it does get tiring. I'm sure it does. I mean, for me, even the moments where that happens, it can be tiring. Like I'm driving to work and I'm hearing something that sounds like Meshuggah, and I'm like, man, just chill,
Yeah, because I like, even if there's like, because it's not always like crazy noise, like it's not like crazy metal in there all the time. It's like sometimes it's just ambience, and then that will surprise me. Then they're just thinking like, this is gentle and it's not intrusive. But, and then I can be in a, like, if I'm in a stressful environment with my chromesthesia, all that like visual like comes through the stimuli of being like overstimulated with like if I'm on a train and there's like a kid screaming and there's noise and like the rumble of the train or whatever, like I pretty much walk around with like noise cancelling headphones constantly in public. If I'm with someone, I can filter it out, but on my own, I almost always have noise cancellers on. Right. Because it's literally too much for me. It's like I'm you mentioned Meshuggah, like the first time I heard Bleed, I literally felt terrified. I could like visualize rust and the sensation of someone coming to kill me. So
really,
as much as I love that song, I love the polyrhythms and it's such a mood. But like, if I listen to it for too long, I literally start to feel scared and like, I don't feel safe. I gotta get out of it. And I'll listen to like a Disney soundtrack or something.
Like honestly, I wish I could listen to a song and have such, like, I don't think I've ever personally had that visceral and that real of an emotion from a song.
I'm like that with a lot of stuff. Even like, I don't know, like even just like stuff from games or just like little moments of like intensity. Like I start to like, I guess you would call me like a very empathic listener, where it's like I'm understanding the sensation and the feeling of what's going on during either the plot of the story. Do you think you can feel what the
artist is trying to portray a lot of times?
I get a lot of that from Devon.
Okay,
Devin Townsend stuff, absolutely.
Me
like
too.
Some stuff has left me bawling, like just because it's like it's from a very honest and raw place, and I think that's where music should come from.
What's can you recall any songs in particular?
I remember the first time I listened to, this was back when I was about 14. I used to listen to Muse, and there was a song on the second album, on Origin of Symmetry. It's a song called Citizens Erased, and there was just something about the mood of that just made me cry, just realizing like this was a song about like someone who is like trying to like erase the bad parts of their past, and this idea of like, just sort of like washing away the sins of like, and the memories of like pain. And like at like a young age, I was crying over this, and my friends were like, what the fuck, what are you crying about? It's just piano. But like when you understand the concept of like what someone's writing and what they're feeling, I think the whole point of music is to be empathic and reflective. Yeah. In all moods, whether it's like party music or we're just writing metal to kick ass, or as my friend calls it, mad at my fucking dad music, where it's just like, get out of my room, no one understands me, I don't get enough cuddles, or it's someone trying to impart the idea of optimism and why it's so important to foster love and joy, even if it's coming from an aggressive place. I think that's very important.
I get a lot from your music. Me and Kit were actually talking about this before we called you. Is you have some very dare I say optimistic lyrics? You have very warm and some hopeful yet vulnerable lyrics.
I feel like I'm being hugged when I listen to one of your tracks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Oh, that's a nice sentiment. Oh, because sometimes my friends listen to my stuff and they just hear like the onslaught of like wall of sound where it's just like guitars and choirs and drums and synths and crazy stuff, and they don't really absorb the lyrics. They're just thinking like, oh, that's nice.
They aren't really listening, right?
I guess so. I guess like people interpret things differently. Like I showed one of my friends Resonate just when it was done, and I was like, here's some headphones, just listen to it and let me know what he thinks. And instead of being like very analytical and like going through songs by songs like we'll probably end up doing, he was like, it's clever, it's good how you put it all together, yeah. And I was like, do you have any thoughts about like the lyrics or like the content of the mood of anything? No, it's all good. Well done. And I was like, all right, that's okay. But it's like a lot of the time I just make music just for me, about like what do I want to hear, because my rule has always been, and this is in no way of like a level of being like above anyone, but my rule is like fans and audience come second. Because it's all about like what definitely. I think when it comes to like, if you're just making stuff for people that they want to hear, like, oh, we have an audience, we know what they like. We like it when it's like, this chord progression. We like it when they use this kind of kick drum, and then we'll do a little bluesy solo in the middle, and they'll guess like, through this gig, and we'll get paid. I don't like that approach. Like I have friends who are in bands and stuff, and they write all this stuff they really care about, and I have a friend that's in a punk band, and they do all this stuff about like politics and apocalyptic sort of scenarios, and it's all very sort of theatrical and sort of industrial punk, but they tour and like no one understands it because it's just for them, and they're doing like empty gigs and just all this other stuff, and it's just like they love it, they love what they're doing, but like you're not going to resonate with everyone, but sometimes you don't have to if you're doing it just for you, right?
And I might add, I mean, if you're not getting a certain amount of enjoyment out of your art, really, what's the point?
I think that's true with any creative endeavor. It's like, if you're taking time out of your life to spend years doing something just to be like, what do you think? And then they'll go like, it's all right. It's okay. And then it just deflates you. It's just like this thing of just being like, I spent 5 years on this and no one gets it. But then it's got to come from like, I spend time on this for me because this is therapeutic to me. And it's not about ego, and it's not about like, feeding the ego and like what it wants. It's just a way of being therapeutic to your own sense of creative needs. I think that's important, and I think a lot more people, especially when doing art, should do it, because we don't do it enough, I think.
I agree. There definitely is a direct connection between how involved you are with, because every human being has a creative side, whether they fuel that or not, it's kind of subjective, but everyone's got a creative side, and it's got to be fueled somehow. And some people use, all sorts of things that aren't productive. Not saying that art is the only way to be productive, but it's really cool to see someone who not only acknowledges that they have that need instead of just completely ignoring it, but also clearly applying that into their own life and capitalizing on it.
Because I think, like everyone, like you said, everyone has the capacity to be creative, but then there's some people that just be like, I just like to listen to music. I just like to, I like to read, or I like to watch films. But like, I think the people that want to be creative, it's a sense of understanding humanity. I've always thought about like all art is all about reflection in anything, whether it's like video games, movies, music, a book, whatever. It's a way of relating to others and hoping to sort of understand the human condition about like how we're allowed to be emotional, we're allowed to be scared, we're allowed to be excited. Because I think when you start muting those emotions, you end up with banality, and you end up with just, this is a song that, it's about, I don't know, getting laid, and, I had my heart broken. It's like, okay, I can't relate to that at the moment, but it's right there. And it's like, but then when you write about stuff you care about, and you write about, sorry.
I said it's coming one day. It'll get you.
It might.
Hopefully not. But those songs will always be there.
Yeah, they'll always be there, and you're like, oh, damn it. But but like I said, I think when you ignore those parts where they don't get to express yourself, you end up with a very stoic and very sort of grey outlook on life, where it's like, I have a friend who has an uncle who hasn't seen a film since like 1978. And I think that's insane. And he hasn't seen a film in like 30 years. He watched one in the theaters and he was like, I don't like these. But he loves everything else. And he loves music, and he loves classical stuff, and he loves jazz. And I'm just thinking, that's his way of understanding that process is, but he's not going to get it from a visual thing, but his way is just listening to people. And you've always said, it's very important to listen to people because you never know what people are going to say and all these other things. But, I think it's very important, I've always said, to foster self-expression, because we don't get enough of it. If everything's just automated and just sort of hand-given to you, and it's just... I've always said it's very important to inspire people.
It is, indeed.
Because we don't do enough of it.
We don't, and I think that is one of the most beautiful things that a human being can offer another, is to inspire them in some way.
The idea of inspiration, because I had a friend once, he was like, how do you stay inspired? And I said, like, because I believe in myself. And he was like, well, how do you believe in yourself? And I'm just thinking, well, no one else is gonna.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mean that from like yourself. No one, it's not that like, no one cares about what you're doing, but like, only you can will your creations into existence. No one else is gonna write your music for you unless you Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber or whatever, where people have like literally like 8 writers, and I'm just thinking like, how the fuck? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, indeed. This is kind of off topic, but it's something I've been meaning to ask you. So the drums that you use on the albums, I'm assuming that they're programmed drums. Could that be the MT Power drum kit I hear?
I do use that, and I also use just various versions of just free drums, because I can't get a kit in here. My studio isn't big enough, and it's just also because I have neighbors. So I understand drums. I understand. I have two drummers on my music course, and one just does straight up normal just patterns, and then I have another one I can talk about, like, okay, it's in 3/4, it's a 130 BPM, and there's a blue shuffle in the middle, and there's also a 7/8 near the end, and if you want to do a crash on the china, you can do that. And he's like, okay, got it. So I understand what I want out of drums, but programming them, it's like, if I had the time and the space to learn how to do it physically, I would. But I pretty much program all of them. Yeah.
Me too. So I thought that was interesting because I use the exact same drum kit. I use the MT Power drum kit on my last album.
I've used that quite a bit just because I like the interface and I'm used to it now. I've had it for like 6 years. So
yeah. Did you ever pay for it?
Yeah. I got so sick of looking at the little, it's like you start a track you're listening to and then you press preview and then there's like no drums.
Yeah, and then you have to be like, oh yeah, I forgot to turn it on.
And I scroll all the way down for like 150 tracks and I'm like, this little yellow bar is like, it's on, but it's like, oh, you gotta press skip. And I'm like, I just pay it. I pay for everything. Like, because I don't actually have like an amp or pedals or anything like that. All my guitar stuff is all just through Bias Effects. But it's the same thing. Like, I don't have a lot of room. I have neighbors. My walls are thin, which is surprising because I have neighbors on both sides of my house and none of them knew that I did music until like a month ago. And I've been living in this same space for like 8 years and they had no idea. All the guitar and all the screaming and all the death metal stuff and all the growling and they just like no idea. And then one day I just invited a neighbor over for a cup of tea and they saw my acoustic in the living room. Oh, you do music, do you? Oh, what kind of stuff do you play? And I'm like, stuff. In terms of, I like a lot of my setup is virtual just because of space convenience or just noise. So.
Me too. So you mentioned some death metal stuff. I wanted to say real quick, the growls that you do on Validation are really solid, man. Like, when I first heard that, it blew my mind.
That is the first time I've ever done anything like that in a song I've done. I was in a slight sort of, not death metal band, but like a band that just needed like strong sort of like sort of stuff. And I haven't done it for years. And I was thinking like, this is the only way I can sort of like, progress this message across of this idea of like not being angry at the idea of not being validated, but like it was a way of saying like I don't give a fuck in the best possible way I could with like that growl and everything. And like I don't know how I did it. That's the weird thing. I listen back, I literally just like
saying you do you, boo.
Basically, and like I did the growl and stuff, and I'm like I know how I'm doing it, but I can't explain it to people. It's just force of will. I don't have technique or anything. I just, like with all my singing, I just do it until I can taste blood, and then I just sort of, I'm fine for 2 weeks, and I can hit any note I kind of want to hit. So it does hurt, though.
You do, technique-wise, you do get to a point, typically, where you've got to stop because of physical
it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. I'm just like, I can taste blood. Okay. And then I just get on with it, and then I'm fine for like 2 weeks, and then... It's weird to explain.
Right. It's almost like your body knows how to do something that maybe your mind is not making all the connections with.
Or it could be the case that like my mind knows what it wants, but then the body's going, "What the fuck? Oh, all right, okay.
Right,
you're doing this long, and then like your fingers go numb because you're sustaining notes for so long for like, and you're doing like 40 layers of audio, and it's like, okay, my head's going fuzzy. What the fuck? And then it's like I listen back to it, and I'm like, oh, sounds all right.
To follow up from earlier. What color is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to think how to word it. What color to you is a growl?
A growl is sort of like jagged triangles of red and gold. Because it's like this idea of like, it's jagged because it's a way of, my brain is sort of like, this is a thing to keep people away. Because I'm not a loud person. I don't like to shout or yell or scream at people. I'm very... fragile in a sense, when I'm with my friends, I'm just making stupid jokes and just talking like this.
So is triangle kind of the shape of like, I'm friendly but keep your distance?
It's like the growl to me is this thing of like it's like sort of like jagged way of saying keep away when I'm in this sort of like mood of like fuck you growling, and it's like it's jagged and sort of static and sort of sparking, and that's the only way I can see it. And then whenever I do any of my Like I've done covers of like Strapping Young Lad and things like that. And
Really? That's awesome.
I got two on my YouTube. I've got what was it, Relentless and Almost Again, which is fucking hard
Almost
to play
Again.
and
That
sing.
is playing
and
very
singing that
tough
at the same
one.
time is hard. It's like, because it's like you gotta do like open C arpeggios while also doing all the singing and trying to keep it sustained, and then you gotta do the big chords with in tune screaming. And I'm just thinking like,
Yeah, wow.
it took like
That is a big
6
one to
hours.
do.
It is a big one to do, and like I put it on I'm on a Facebook group where like we sort of like just trade. Oh, this is what I did on guitar today, and I was like, you know what? I think they might get a kick out of this. And then people look at me like, how the fuck did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know.
I just did it. Yeah.
It just happened. It just like I said, my brain understands it, and my body comes out and does these things. And I show my friends, and they're like, I didn't know you could do that. And I'm like, neither did I. It's great. I love it.
Right.
Back on the subject of Devi real quick, there is a song, I believe it's on Resonate, Our Way, and it has a section that sounds a lot like a section in Ohm from Devin Townsend. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it that ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-ba?
Yeah.
In a good way. Like,
in a good way,
like
yeah.
I
tasteful,
think
yes.
it was around the time, that's when I was watching the Plovdiv DVD where he does it all in the big
Yeah.
Coliseum, and like I was listening to that, and I really like the way that like you had this riff and then a statement. It was like that and then that, and I guess like that melody just sort of stuck in my head of just being like, how can I sort of not say like, I want to rip off Devin, because that's not going to be healthy. So my thing was like,
Yeah.
do the riff, but then like have a statement of just maybe just one or two chords behind it just to facilitate some sort of noise going on in it. And it was this thing of, it was almost like a beck and call sort of thing. And I was thinking like, I like what that song does, but obviously that's much more meditative, whereas Our Way was much more of a statement of just being like, you know, being seen as equal and trying to like live your life your own way, and just sort of understand that you don't need to follow people, and you don't need to follow false prophets and, you know, things. It's sort of I think subconsciously it was also a song about religion, and how we shouldn't, like I said, believe in false prophets. So people who have the idea that they think they know what's best for you, when ultimately you know what's best for you because you're your own person, right? So that's where Our Way came from. But that thing of that ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-ba, I think that was just a way of just thinking like, that's a cool structure. I want to find a way to use that in a way that makes sense to me, and then all the crazy arpeggios going up and down with that riff, that's and then all these like nice little happy major arpeggios, and then it sort of goes off kilter by going down by like half a bar as it goes on. And it was like, yeah, not everything's always going to be aligned when you're trying to focus on such a declarative statement.
Definitely, yeah. I really like that. I really like the way you put that. Let's get into a little bit of Ascension. Let's talk about that. Would you mind giving us a track by track overview of it?
Okay.
If you can't, you can skip a track or two.
And if you want to
want
do it this way, you don't have to go into every individual detail. If you want to pick key points, if you said, you know, if you wanted people to know 3 to 4 to 5 things about each song, what would those things be?
I think it all depends on the song by song basis, though, because some songs took longer than others. Some songs were literally in the oven for like 2 years, and then some songs literally came out in like a day, and I'm like, oh shit, that just came out of me on a good day. I had a good coffee one morning. It's like, oh, I blammed out this song, and like, I don't know what it means. I should analyze it, and then it turns into like, okay, I need to structure this a little bit longer, and I'll spend an extra week on it. So Solitude I think that was actually one of the first ones I wrote before COVID. And no, it was actually during COVID. And I wrote this massive chord progression out on just acoustic guitar at first. So just thinking like, it was a big statement of chord going from chord to chord and mood changing, but then ultimately ending and resoluting in a loop. Because the whole point of the song was just talking about like how, well, it's the whole statement of the album was that if you're comfortable in your place in life, then I'm not saying that's bad, but there are always ways to adapt and grow and progress. And like, right. I think the idea of like, the reason it's called Solitude is because the last lyric, solitude, it calls to you, is that like, if you want to have peace in life and to be where you want in life, you gotta go through some mental hurdles, where it's understanding the idea of, every day is like, if every day is a grind to you and it's just like, it's just another day, one more spin around the earth, but it's also another day to reinvent yourself and start anew, because the universe is a cycle that doesn't end until eventually the heat death of the universe happens in about 46 billion years. So we're fine. We got plenty of time to grow and adapt. And it came about that the second half, where like it all kicks up and then there's a key change and then the drums get a bit more involved and like the synths and the choir is all... That's the idea of like, yeah, we're all on this journey. We are one connected entity. And it's like, we're unified across, country, race, gender, sexuality, outlook on life. And like, we're all human. And it's the idea of like, not everyone's going to understand everything that we can offer people. And this, like I said, you and I can make this life our own, and it can either be a unified thing where we're looking for, like, not saying like a utopian society, but at least one that's free from, prejudice and hate and intolerance. But it's never
everyone just letting each other be, letting each other working together.
But it's almost never going to happen because we're dicks. We're not designed. It's always an us versus them mentality.
It's almost like some people are just looking for an opponent, regardless of who that may be. And they often peak on someone who's already struggling.
Either struggling or is at least trying to better themselves. Because there's some people that love being rooted in stagnation and stoicism, where it's like, well, the world's gonna end, so screw it. And it's like, well, that's a very safe way to see things, but it won't benefit you in the long run, because eventually you'll just become sort of, stagnant, and this idea of...
Sat in your way.
Sat in your ways, stagnant, and not being able to offer anything to anyone because you don't connect with anyone. And the connections that you make with people are far more important than people realize, even if they're just little. Even if it's just with strangers that you're just passing by. Every interaction that you make with people has a profound impact on the way... It's like the butterflies and hurricanes chaos theory sort of mentality. So that song was basically all about, like, hey, every day can be the same, but... you have a chance to grow constantly, and eventually you'll find you'll be in a place where like you will have solitude, you will have peace, but like the song is very reflective of being like this. Like it starts with this big sort of wall of everything. There's orchestras, and there's a choir, and there's a gospel, and there's guitar solos, and then there's blast beats, and then I got like a full like Marvel orchestra near the end, and then I've got a choir sing. I got this software that basically whatever you type, the choir will sing with me. So that power says we are one, unified across the sky. There's like 30 Hollywood female choir singers behind me just singing that, and I'm just thinking like, this is like the coolest shit ever. It's just like, awesome. I don't know what to do with that. And then I spent so long on that, and that was meant to be a lot longer, and it was like, I think I got to like 9 minutes, and I was like, I can't open the album with a 9-minute track. I'm not Dream Theater. I can't. So I tried to like wrangle it down and just make it like a sort of a little snapshot of like what everything the album has to offer in terms of scope and scale and the complexity and the virtuosity of it and the guitar solo bits and the idea of like dynamics. And yeah. I liked that. That was a fun one to do. Next one, Before We Know. I was listening to a band called Waxfang, and I really liked their approach to this sort of like psychedelic sort of fuzz. And the way that they write their stuff is very sort of sparse. And I know I keep saying "and" a lot. I'm very sorry for that. But Before We Know came about the idea that we put expectations on ourselves and expectations of life and the idea of routine and what we expect of ourselves and what we expect from other people. And it came about when I was thinking, me and my friend had this really deep conversation during COVID, because like first year of COVID, I didn't see anyone. I was literally just on my own, just like writing stuff, watching movies, doing whatever. I literally couldn't see anyone, go anywhere, nothing. And me and my friend had this really like long 4-hour conversation about like the meaning of life and why are we here, bro? And like all this other stuff. And we came about the idea that the whole point of life is to love. This life is to literally like love each other, because it's the hardest thing you can possibly do for yourself and other people, and that everyone has the capacity and the potential to be good. No matter where you are in your point in life, whether you're like at the bottom barrel where you got nothing to offer anyone, the least you can do in the grand scheme of things is just to be loving and loved. And because that's all we ever want at the end of the day. So that song came about through the idea that everyone has the potential to be good. And before you know it, it's happened.
Yeah.
And then you get through these things
great.
of like these ideas of like the expectations you put on yourself, and also, you know, the exasperation of just thinking like, is it worth it? Is it worth being good? Is it worth, like, should I just put on a front? Should I just be fake about it? And you're like, no, because you'll know that and other people will get that. And then
Right. Absolutely.
there's a lot of moments on the album where I do talk about like we have tomorrow, and it's like, because we always have this idea like we have all the time in the world to be better. But it comes from a place of just thinking that if you're struggling with something today, there's no reason why you can't do it tomorrow, or, you know, put it off in a time that's good for you. It's almost like writer's block in a way, but from an emotional standpoint. Because it's always like this idea of like, oh, I don't know what to write, or I don't know what to do. But it's also like, oh, I don't know how to feel. I don't know how I feel about these people. But like, when your baseline is just to love, it's like the easiest thing in the world then. Because, you know, I have moments in my life where like I don't feel like I'm being as good as I can be, or I'll say something wrong, or like something gets internalized wrong by someone else, and I feel like a piece of shit because I'm just thinking like, no, I always want to be seen, you know, as good, and we all want to be seen as good, but it's not always going to happen. But as long as it's always coming from a place of being honest, I will always value that, and I will always value that with other people, and other people will always value that from me. Next song, Redemption. That came about in the middle of COVID, and I didn't mean for it to sound so churchy, because it's got these like church organs and this like big gospel choir singing behind me. That was never the intention to write like some sort of like religious sort of statement. Never. That was never the intention. The lyrics all came about the idea that when we was in COVID, that after it's all said and done, like I don't know how it was for you guys over there, but over here it was sort of, we had all these little rules going on, and this idea of like, oh, when are we allowed to see people? When are we allowed to do this again? When can we, you know, I'm sure it's very different over in America. Excuse me. But the lyrics of that came about that, for me, redemption meant, I hope there's something good at the end of all this. I hope that after we come out of COVID, and that we can actually connect with the people that we haven't been able to connect with in a long time. And hopefully the people haven't changed too much, because I'm not going to lie, I had friends before COVID, and then after COVID happened, I actually lost a couple because they turned into different people because their viewpoints and their political affiliations and all these other things, where they were just like, I had one friend that was incredibly toxic during COVID because they just thought like, no one's doing enough to fix the world. And I'm like, well, you're not doing anything to fix the world. You're just playing fucking Dark Souls all day, you know, in your underpants, eating mac and cheese, doing nothing. You could better your situation. And they're just like, no, I don't care. And that's when I was like, okay, I can't be friends with.
What can you do for someone at that point other than just be there ready to support them if they change their mind about how they view the world?
But they never did. For like an entire year they were like that, and it became this thing of just like very hard to redeem themselves after it all, and just being like, this is their mindset now, this is how they are, and that's sad. And I do miss them. I was friends with this person for like 12 years, and then one day done. So the whole point of that song was like, God, I hope there's something good at the end of all this. I hope we get to reconnect again as people. But I also guess it could be seen as a religious statement on the idea of, is there something good at the end of this? If either of you are religious at all, I don't know if you are. I'm not. But I think that's true for, and the idea of like, give me time to heal, give me time to sleep, when those lyrics come up, is like, I think when you are put through so much in life, even if it's like, because everyone's got a complex life, but everyone is always going through something. So the rule is just always be kind. So the idea of, you know, allow yourself to rest, allow yourself to heal. And I guess if you have to like look to some sort of comfort, whether it be God or whatever, if that's also valid too. But the whole point of the song was to just say, you know, when this
there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
There's a light at the end of there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, but like there's always that doubt there. Like what was the lyrics? So much time has passed, broken promises are, you know, aren't built to last, because it's like, oh yeah, we'll definitely hang out, oh we'll definitely do this, and oh I'm so looking forward to seeing you again. And then it's like, really? Because you haven't talked to me in like 3 months. And I'm just like, and then it's this whole thing of just, you know, everyone was going through something, everyone was doing either coping in a way that wasn't healthy or coping in a way that only they understood, because isolation's a bitch, right? So that song was just like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, you just gotta, you know, if you have to pray to the universe for it, do it. It's allowed and it's healthy.
Right, whatever brings you comfort.
And whatever brings you comfort. Then, next one, what is a soul? And this one was a really quick one. I wrote this one in about 6 hours, which was
really,
yeah, really.
That's
like
impressive.
in an afternoon. I had this idea of just thinking like, what was it? I was watching a cartoon from the 90s called, I don't know if you two have ever seen it, Duckman.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fuck with Duckman, dude.
I like, it was just something I grew up on, and I was like, oh, they're all on YouTube, sweet. And there's an episode where they're talking about like, oh, you have to pay if you want to come to this hippie circle with your soul, you know, the essential part of that, what's inside you. And then she shakes his hand and she's screaming off, and he's like, hey, free entry, great.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about like, is the soul, is it something obviously it's something metaphorical. It's nothing that's rooted in science, but I think it means different things to different people. So the idea of that song came about like, why do we even need one? Why? Like, if it's to do with our sense of morality, then where does that come from? Does it come from us? Does it come from divinity? Does it come from religion? Does it come from outside sources? Does it come from this internal little Jiminy Cricket that we have all inside of us? You know, more of an insect than an instinct.
Right.
So that was a really quick one of just being like, what is this thing that everyone says, oh, I'd sell my soul for that? You know, but like, what does it really mean at the end of the day to give up something that is metaphorical? So that was a really quick one. Obviously, then the title track, Ascension. I wanted to... This was...
Yeah, and I just want to say I love the guitar work on this song.
That was interesting because I wanted to do the bare minimum with the progression. It is literally just 3 chords. But I thought...
3? Are you kidding me?
It
really sounded like way more to me.
Because the way that it builds...
That's my untrained ear kicking in.
No, I'm sure it'll get better in time. I'm like that. Like I can barely read music and I teach it, you know? But I understand the basis of like major and minor. But if you said like, what's a major 11, 13 over 9, I'm not going to know, you know?
Right,
but,
right.
My way with my synesthesia is that like I relate, like I said, shapes, but those shapes and colors and sound. So when I do shapes of chords, they have a color as well. So when I'm doing these like little pathways of shred and craziness, I don't see it as like little blocks like you see in like books or whatever. I see it in like little branching pathways. So the way that Ascension came about was like, what can I do with just a couple of chords to sort of illustrate what I was doing with Breaking the Stratosphere, which was the sensation of being above the world and feeling like you've ascended to a higher plane. Not of like, oh, I'm on a new plane of existence and it's all hippy-dippy, but this sense of like euphoria of just thinking, this is just a space for me to relax in, and that there's also the potential for energy there that can be expelled the longer you spend in this little space of time. So the way that built was, you know, those 3 little chords and then just running it through a bunch of crazy ambient stuff because I love making ambient stuff. I literally have about 2 terabytes of just ambience, and I'll walk around the house with it on and just because it chills me out. And it's stuff like, you know, I'll have like a shimmer pedal going into a delay pedal, going into a reverb, going into a loop, going into a delay, going into a... Oh, it's crazy. The setup's crazy for it. But I love it.
No, that's awesome.
It's ridiculous, but I love it. So that whole point was like, by the end, when the guitar is just going nuts and I'm doing all the shredding and all the stuff, like that's what I used the 30 fret for, because it was like such a thing of like escalating and getting higher and higher, and almost like this sort of like climactic release of just thinking like, I'm in a space that no one can hurt me, this is relaxing, but there's an energy in here, there's an energy in there to understand that that is the human potential wrapped in that little sense of comfort, and that you can ascend, you can ascend into that level of consciousness in this little 3 minute 47 seconds.
Definitely.
and then validation. And
okay.
The weird thing about that is that my friend thought was like, so you write a song about you want to be validated? And it's like, no, it's a song about saying that we don't need validation. And the whole idea of
really?
like, that's where the whole, where it all came from. Because my friend was like, so you obviously you make music because you want people to hear it, right? And I'm just like, I don't care if people hear it. If people like it, great. And if you know, I'm looking on my YouTube, because I have like all my stuff is through DistroKid, so I can see how many views things get on Spotify and stuff. And like,
Me too.
It's like 57 views, 18 views, 12 listens.
Right.
I had 6 listeners this month. Whoa. But
Heck yeah.
but it's like, it's good.
We were 2 of them.
And I'm very grateful
Yeah,
for
we
that.
were 2 of them.
And I'm glad for that.
Actually, maybe it'll bounce up to 8 now.
Maybe. But like the goal isn't thinking like, oh, I want 1 million viewers and I want to do this and I want to tour the world and I want a gold house and a rocket car and that isn't the goal. The goal is for someone to listen to what I do and be like, wow, I get a sense of what that guy's feeling. But I'm not saying like, oh, this is good. Well done. I'm proud of you. Because it's not rooted in anything like, oh, I didn't get enough cuddles growing up because, my family is great and I love my family and friends and they're all very supportive about all the stuff I do. But like, I make stuff because I want to make it and I want to hear what's in my brain and get it out. And that like I said, that came out through a conversation where my friend was like, but you make stuff because you want people to hear it. And I'm like, no, I want to make stuff because I want to make stuff. He goes, yeah, but it's rooted in like, are you making any money on it? Are you doing this? Are you doing any gigs or anything? I'm like, no, I literally make it because I want to make it. This is just a hobby for me. This is just like a big hobby for me. And
some people struggle to understand that a little bit because they expect you to only want to do something like that requires so much work and effort if it ends in financial gain.
Yeah, if are you making any money? Are you?
The world.
Because I had friends who were like, "Oh, just get into a band, dude. Just do anything. Like, get into a bluegrass band." I was like, "What? You want me to blow into a jug for all eternity and be like, whoo, 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 whoo?" And I was like, I can't. Like, if I want to do that, I'll just make
shout out to my jug blowers out there. By the way.
Shout out to the
you
jug
fancy
blowers.
jug blowers out there. So that song came about like this one part of being this like growly, sort of death metal-y sort of thing that I was doing, of just being like, fuck you, you don't understand my process. Inside my brain is like a labyrinth of nonsense. And to say that someone else like, oh, you're doing this just for this, I'm like, no, you don't even understand like the first part of it. And then the other side is saying like, I'm like the cleaner part was like, I'll navigate. And it's like this idea of this is the part where I'm calmly explaining that I don't need the validation to what I'm doing. And then it gets it's a little bit dark, and it's probably the darkest song on the album, coming from a place of, you're not gonna understand what I do, just please listen to it from what I'm trying to say. Even though the lyrics are growly and I'm being all like, talking about self-discovery and like I'm like a sculptor and I'm like I'm forming this thing as I'm understanding it as I'm making it. And so not everyone's going to get it. It's not a simple statement, like I said, like, oh, my girlfriend left me, or I'm heartbroken, or I've got a lot of money, or let's party, which is like 80% of the songs we hear today. Or,
It really is.
And it's really annoying. We have so much we can say, but we don't, and I don't know why. Then The Devil's Town came about through a friend of mine who is religious. And we started talking about, like, what if there is something at the end of this? And I'm like, are you going to be comfortable with that if you end up going to the bad place? And he was thinking, like, no, I lived a good life. I think I'll be going to the other place. And I'm like, well, that's good. So, yes, me and my friend who is religious, we were talking about, like, what if you end up in the place you don't want to end up? And I'm just thinking, if I do, I'm not going to know how to handle it. Like, I'm not religious. I guess you would say I'm not anti-religious, but I'm just non-religious, I'll believe it when I see it, if there's a case for it, Oh, crap, I'm here.
You're religious.
I like that. But the point of The Devil's Town was to say, like, oh, you're here? Oh, I guess you're just going to have to enjoy it now, There's a lot of pain here. There's a lot of fire. There's a lot of death and a lot of nightmares every night. And you're just going to have to just share that with everyone all the time. How'd you feel about that? And then...
That's about all you can do.
That's all you're going to be able to do in hell. And also, obviously, Devil's Town, Devon Townsend. It's a little nod in there.
Yeah. Is that song in any way related to Bad Devil?
Bad Devil.
Off of Infinity?
Oh! No, I wasn't even thinking of that.
No. When I first heard it, I remember thinking, like, this really reminds me of Bad Devil off of Infinity.
I haven't thought of that song in years. Holy shit.
I'm surprised, honestly.
I don't listen to a lot of the Infinity stuff. I haven't thought of that for years. Oh my god. Because I was thinking more like Futurama, Robot Hell. I was thinking of Princess and the
Robot
Frog,
Hell,
and that,
I
like,
love
you know,
that.
are you ready? I was thinking all that sort of stuff, and I was thinking like vaudevillian Disney villain stuff, and I was just thinking, you know, those big arrangements they all have, and the big horns, and like, I imagine someone like some sort of like the robot devil from Futurama would probably sing something like that, and then I guess the song goes on and it's like, yeah, you're going to be here again and again and again and again and again. And then by that second time it happens around and it's just like full bore, that long sort of like growl that goes on for like 37 seconds with just like the drums going crazy and that like, and I'm just there just being like for friggin' ever. And I'm just thinking like, fuck this. And then it goes into that little jazzy sort of like, almost like spy music of like, this is a way of me understanding that like you could be self-destructive and be like, right, if that's what you want to do, fine. If you want to live your life this way, fine. But then there's that little part of your mind that says like, you don't have to be this way. You don't have to be self-destructive. You don't have to be this way. Even if you have even if the pessimism and the cynicism and the nihilism is saying that like, you know, life is meaningless, this is pointless, you're going to end up in hell, just enjoy the ride. You don't have to, because this idea of like, you could be here again and again, and then the song ends on that big sort of bombastic major chord, and it's just this thing of just saying that like, you can get through it. You can get through anything that life throws at you, because if you think that you're like a helpless victim and like, oh, this is just the path that I'm on, that like, I'm going to be hopeless, and this is me, and I'm just going to be a market for this, and I'll just do what I've always done, and that'll be that. And I'm just thinking, no, that can't be the way we live. Because I find that's tragic in a way. So when I was coming up with that, I was just thinking like, you can live this way. You can be in the worst state. Like I was friends with someone before COVID who was very self-destructive, and I mean everything. And there were some days where I was scared that they weren't going to be here anymore, and this was someone who was very nurturing towards me and always wanted to make sure that I was okay, but were never taking the time out for themselves to understand themselves and what they were doing to themselves physically and mentally. And I think it came about through that also, as well as this religious connotation, metaphorical, philosophical discussion I had with my friend. I'm just thinking like, there are people that have other people's best intentions, but then don't look after themselves because they don't think they're worth it. And they're just thinking like, well, I don't have a lot going on in my life. You know, I'll look after everyone else, but I won't validate my concerns or what I need. And, you know, I'm not going to eat for a couple of days. You know, I'm going to do this to myself because, you know, it's better than dealing with the hard parts of life. But I think you get through it eventually when you got good people around you. And I think when you shut out the people that really do want what's best for you, you end up in that cycle of just being like, I'm just going to sit in the dark and watch horror movies and just watch Let's Plays and streams all day and just watch other people have fun, instead of having the life that you want. Even if it's like not ideal, it's better than the alternative, which is like just being nothing. Because I think that's so dangerous. Like I said earlier, it's so important to foster joy and optimism in people, because we don't do it enough, because we have this rooted society now where we think like being damaged is beautiful, and we have this notion of that if we're broken, that means we can be fixed, which is a beautiful sentiment. But there are people that linger on it, and they just, and it's this thing of self-deprecation. I know a lot of people that do it, and they just be like, oh, I'm terrible, I can't do this, I'm no good at this, why did I think I was good at this, I'm a waste of time, no one likes me, I don't have any friends. And that is literally the only thing in my life that literally irks me. Like I like all the things with like politics and fucking Trump over there. I'm well aware of everything going on over there, guys. You know.
Yeah, we got it bad.
Yeah, and I used to look at my phone every day, like, what's he done now? Fuck, it's gonna be so good.
What's he up to now?
Yeah. We're gonna work on this, and we're gonna build a wall. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be so good. And I was just thinking, like, all these people that are just this case of like, everything's wrong, nothing works right, don't bother doing anything, we're broken, let's not fix anything. And that is literally the only thing in my life when I hear people in my social circle or family or friends, when they tear themselves down, it's like, life is hard enough. You know, with everything going on in the world today in terms of like finance, government, money, the environment, you know, everything, all these concerns that we're worried about for the future. And we're just thinking like, why bother? And I'm just thinking, like, because we're here
Right.
now and we're present and we're alive and breathing and, like, what's a poem? I wrote a poem in college and I said, give me the rising peaks of excitement and the low dregs of depression, but make me deaf to the hum of mediocrity.
Well, that's actually really beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's profound.
Because it's like, it's better to feel something and then rather than just be like, nothing matters. Forget it. Doesn't matter. Screw it. And that's literally what the Devil's Town was about. Just being like, fine, if you're okay with this, fine. But it's not going to be good. And you're going to be in misery forever until you die. But you could just be like, your self-destructiveness can come to an end if you just talk about it. If you just reach out to people, if you just connect with people, even if you go like no one, there's always someone. There's someone who always wants to listen. And I see so many people that have been hurt and, marginalized or victimized, and they think like what they say doesn't matter. So I think that was the whole point of Ascension and Resonate, because I wrote both of those pretty much in COVID. And I'm just thinking like it's very important to connect with people when they think that there's no one to connect with. Because I think if we did these little isolated little islands of ourselves where we're just like, I'm a lone island, I wander through the forest alone like an elephant, disturbing no one. That's valid from time to time, but I think when you miss out on the valuable connections of humanity in your life, that you can't take part in life because there's so much to explore emotionally and, artistically and expressively, and whether it's love or hate or anything, there are ways of growing as a person. And like I said, everyone has the capacity to be good, everyone has the capacity to be a dick, and those things have to go together, but each one has to grow. And you can't grow if you live in a perpetual bubble of I hate myself because no, I'm not worthy of things. And it's this whole thing of that. So that's where the Shapes of Kindness came in. And it's the longest one on the album. And it's this whole thing of, like I said, I mentioned before we recorded that it came from a Jim Henson film from the 80s, The Dark Crystal, which I deeply, deeply, deeply love. I watched it when I was 9 at my friend's house on a wobbly VHS, and I didn't understand it, and I went home and it made me think, it made me dream, it made me think of weird fantasy worlds of like, what the hell was this thing that I watched? And then, I ended up getting it on DVD and Blu-ray and 4K, and I watch it every year now on the anniversary, and I love the series, and I have all the books, and I have the board game, and everything. I know everything about that world, and I love it. And I shouldn't. It's stupid. It's irrelevant information, but
it's great.
Would you
It's
say
great.
that it's your favorite fantasy?
Oh yeah,
world?
absolutely. I love the world of Thra and the Skeksis and everything. I love everything what it represents.
I always loved the Skeksis.
I love the Skeksis. I love everything, every little podling and gelfling and everything in Thra and the people of Woodrow and everything. It's crazy that it came from Jim Henson. It came from Mr. Hi, old Kermit the Frog here. And it came into this like world of just like, holy shit, this is like a dark world of, environmental storytelling and also like this deep philosophical discussion about the 1% draining the life force and the environment for the world just to stay in power longer.
Right.
That's very relevant to today still.
Pretty accurate representation of the state of affairs.
Yeah. So I never got it as a kid. And then when I was in college and I did media studies, like, oh my God, I get it now. I know why I love it. And it's great. And obviously I just love all the practical work that goes into it. I love puppetry. I love all that sort of stuff. I grew up with puppets and wanting to make puppets. And I like my living room is just full of like plushies and puppets. And I have like Muppets and stupid things just because I like the idea of something that's non-sentient and giving it a personality.
That's great, man. That is really cool. Yeah, I first watched that movie when I was young, and I remember just being mystified by the world it painted, by the Skeksis, by everything about it. Did you watch the, I think it was a Netflix series?
I've watched it numerous times now, and like every time my friends come over and like they haven't seen it yet, it's like, guess what we're watching for the next 6 hours? and like,
right.
And I'm like, oh, watch his bit now. Watch his part now when he comes down the stairs. And like, oh, watch how he moves. And like, oh, that's 2 people inside that. And like, oh, that's someone weighted down, like walking on that, and that's someone on stilts. And they're just like, Phil, shut up, let me just watch it. And I'm like, oh, and this is the part where they talk about the underground people, and they do this thing, and that was actually a green screen there. And like, oh, that's the voice of that guy, and that's Mark Hamill. And they're just like, Phil, shut up, I just want to watch it. Like I'm so blown away the fact that that even exists as a show, because it's like 40 years. And what pissed me off about it was like it won an Emmy for like best new show on Netflix, and the day after they canceled it. No more.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like, no, yeah,
I remember that.
You got one season,
specifically, yeah.
that's it. And I'm like, fuck you so much. Because,
Yeah.
but it's been picked up by someone called Shout Services, and they managed to get Labyrinth and Dark Crystal on digital streaming. So you can get it on like iTunes and, you know, was it Apple iMovie, and you can like download it there. So I guess if there's enough call for it, we might get some more stuff, because once the Netflix show came out, it like, Dark Crystal stuff also like blew up again, and there's like, you know, there's more books and there's more comics about it. They had their own convention called the Great Conjunction, where people all meet up and dress as the character. It's kind of like a Comic-Con, just for Dark Crystal though, and I think that's like fucking brilliant. So the Shapes of Kindness came about where Jen is talking to Kira about how these like stone tablets, and how the mystics and the Urus showed them the idea of the shapes of kindness, and you see these flashbacks of like showing, you know, when they used to take care of him and feed him and bathe him and teach him how to like harness the idea of nature and things like that. So the Shapes of Kindness came about from a song of just understanding what does kindness and love look like, even if we're not like physically representing it. And like I said, the idea of like, there's ideas like when the souls collide and we have to harmonize, and like even though we may not be on the same level of understanding everything about everything ever about everyone, there's always going to be a tiny spark of wanting to connect, even if it's the case of like, oh, I don't like this person, oh, I hate this person. There's always going to be something there that makes you think that like, maybe I can talk to this person, maybe I can connect to this person on anything. And then a dialogue starts, and then you realize that like, oh, you can actually, you validate each other's sense of humanity. And the song was this statement of just saying that like, what's the best way to put it? Because it's like the most complicated, it's the most complicated statement on the album, because and that's why it's the longest. It's this idea of if, even though we may not be physically able to connect, something is connecting us on maybe a spiritual level or on a universal scale, because the fact that like we're humans and we evolved, and you know, we have this same journey of wanting to always, well, I know people will say this, like, we're on a journey in life, and we're on a spiritual quest, and we're all brothers and sisters, and it's all hippy-dippy bullshit. This idea that the shapes of kindness are the ones that you forge for yourself, and they could be everything from being incredibly empathic and understanding someone's feelings, to just the idea of listening to someone's plight and letting them vent every bad thing that's ever happened to them, but also understanding your own mental fortitude to understand that, like, if you are empathic, like me, because I'm heavily empathic, like, holy shit, it's annoying. I hate it, but at the same time, I love it because I like the fact that I have the capacity to do it. And I'm sure other people do as well. I'm sure you two are somewhere on that level of, you know, being there for each other and being there for the people you care about.
Indeed.
Because it's so important. And then there's that little part in the midsection, like, almost 3/4 into the song, of just the statement changes of just being like, you want to like, the whole point is like, learn to sort of connect with others, but like, can you connect to this part of you that's actively trying to sabotage you all the time? This idea of like, because I have friends who delve with huge image issues. I have lots of friends who are going through big parts of their lives where, like, you know, it's the same, like, I don't like myself, I don't understand myself, I'm never going to understand myself, and other people aren't going to understand me, and I'm just going to live alone with 9 cats, and blah, 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 and that's what my life will be. And I always come up with this statement of, like, in the morning, you do your thing, you have that morning shower, you wake up, you know, you look at yourself in the mirror, and if you had someone next to you saying all these like horrible things to you, like, you're this, you're that, you're horrible, you're never going to amount to anything, you know, you're going to be living alone with 9 cats, like, you end up throwing them out the fucking window, right? But so why do we allow ourselves to do that to ourselves? It doesn't make any sense. So I came up with this sort of affirmation, because I used to go through the same thing, you know, I used to have like image issues, but I learned to get through it. But I know other friends who aren't doing it so well. I came up with this little affirmation for people to try, and if anyone listening to this little, I don't know what this, I guess you'd say, interview, podcast, ramble,
all
vent.
of the above.
All of the above. I love it. If anyone wants to try this as a way of, you know, if you've made it this far into the conversation, get a sticky note, a piece of paper or anything that's like available to you, and just write on it and just write, I accept myself unconditionally right now. And then stick that on your mirror, and then whenever you see yourself in whatever mirror that you most frequently look into, whether it's the bathroom mirror or a mirror in your bedroom or something like that, you stick that on your mirror and you look yourself in the eyes and you repeat that statement back to yourself. And the first few times you say it, I accept myself unconditionally right now, those first few times you are going to sort of like bitch at yourself and be like, oh, it's stupid, this isn't going to work, this is pointless, this is a waste of time, I'm going to be this and this forever, and no one's going to be able to connect with me, and I'm never going to connect with anyone else. And it's going to be this whole thing. But like after a while, you start to believe it, and you start planting this little seed of self-love in a sense. This is rooted in science. It helps your blood pressure, it improves your eyesight, it improves your metabolism and your blood rate, and all these other things that circulatory allow you to function better when you accept yourself. And that's basically what that statement was saying all the way to the end of that song, of just understanding that if you need to be self-introspective in order to feel like you matter to people, then that shouldn't really be the main goal. The main goal should be able to actualize how you feel as a person, and rooted in everything else going on in the album about the idea of the soul and validation and all these other things and accepting yourself. It has to come from you as an individual about what you want to be happy, and how you can impart that onto others. And that's basically, and that's what Ascension is to me, being able to get yourself out of this horrible mindset that you've probably been in for longer than people like to admit. We all have moments where like of weakness or personal defeat, and we think like, well, this isn't healthy, but I don't know what else to do. And then little things will happen. You'll meet people, you'll run into friends again, someone will say something that makes you smile and understand that like, in order to love anyone else, you have to be able to learn to love yourself, and that's a very true statement. But the whole point of Ascension was to get out and be above all those things that you've either put on yourself or other people who don't understand you have negatively put there, and gets you out of that. It's like, that's why the album cover is like all rooted in like clouds and just this like guy, just like, he's just a guy in a business suit just trying to figure himself out, and he's just like on a mountain, like I'm surveying the world from up here, and I'm just thinking like, I'm surrounded by this energy that came about from me understanding the introspective needs of myself and the human condition.
He's got a briefcase and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
He has ascended.
That's what the whole point was there. He's ascended on this mountain, and who knows how tall that fucking mountain was. That could be that could just be an anthill, or it could be friggin' Kilimanjaro. Right. We don't know. But like
everybody's mountains can be different sizes.
I think the beautiful thing about that is, be it an anthill, be it Mount Kilimanjaro, he has still ascended it.
He's still at the top, and he's like I said, everyone's got a complex life. And that's basically the statement I wanted to make of like, because this was after COVID was all done, and I'm just thinking like, where do we go from here now? Because we've had like 3 years of either feeling miserable or not being able to connect, and either rooted in taking things out on ourselves or just being, stoic, because that's the case I was in. Probably other people were as well. So yeah, I think that was just what I wanted to get across, the fact that like when it gets to the redemption part, like I hope there's something good at the end of this, but I think that's more rooted in the overall message of the album, is like hoping for a better outcome in life and the world and the people you connect with. And I get to scream and shred, so that was great.
Right.
Hey, that's always a plus, isn't it?
Always a plus.
Yeah, and I mean, your vocals are great, your guitar playing's great, your composition is great. Like I said, your composition just reminds me of Debbie so much, and I mean that in the best way possible. I'm not trying to insinuate that you're too similar to Debbie or anything. It's just, it really touched that place in my heart, that really warm, vulnerable place, in the same way that Devin Townsend does. And me personally, I think that is one of the, if not the highest compliments I can give a fellow musician in that regard. I mean, and hearing you talk about your album is just, it's chock full of all this personal meaning and all of these great messages, and deeply rooted in a vast array of introspection and careful consideration. I think that's a great thing. I think you've really done a great thing with this, and I cannot wait to see what you've got planned next.
Well, same here, to be fair, because I have no idea what's going to come out next, because I can only write about my own personal experiences, either with people or way that I see the world. Like when I did Breaking the Stratosphere, that was during a time where like the first album, like I said, from 2012 to like 2018, so I spent so much time on it. I'm just understanding, like, I want to make an album, but I have no idea how to do it. So it came about through, I wanted to try and capture the sensation of flight. And that's why it's called Breaking the Stratosphere, because the idea is that like every song feels like you're going higher and higher into different planes. It starts off of like, oh, this is a good morning to start flying. And then by the end of that song, you just hear this like sound of propulsion of just like, and then it gets rooted into like you're going into the sky and you're going over vast beaches, and then there's this little small moment where you understand that like there's a little love song in the middle just called As Perfect As You, and I remember saying that to a girl once, just saying like I'm never gonna find anyone as perfect as you, and it made her cry, and I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean it. I'm so sorry. So
sorry about that.
Yeah,
I take it back.
I take it back. You suck. I'm terrible.
If it makes you feel better.
Yeah, and that little moment of just being like a romantic song was just being like, you have this sensation of flight, and that's kind of what love does when it makes you feel like you're on cloud nine, and that sort of mentality, and then it gets into this. And then it gets to this point where, like, you are above the stratosphere. You are in space. You are, like, above the world. You're above you're above the little blue dot. And then you realize that, like, the outer reaches of space and things you don't understand are just as scary and just as fucking terrifying and don't make any sense. And it's like, what's one of the songs? Caves of Insanity and Hypergravity. And it's just, like, these, like, heavy statements where it's, like, they don't sound particularly heavy, but it's like the nature and like just the title of like the idea of like Caves of Insanity, where I put all these like monster noises in, and I was trying to do all these like noises and all this crazy shit. Of just being like, this is too much. This is too much for one person to be able to ascend. I gotta get back to Earth. And that's when the idea of Thunderset, I had this image of just someone just basically meteorizing themselves back to the planet while a whole like global like thunderstorm is going on, and then it loops back to the same morning sounds and bird sounds, and it's like a looping album of just being like, you're allowed to leave whenever you want, you're allowed to ascend whenever you want, you're allowed to be this version of yourself that's very sort of unencumbered and sort of not lackadaisical, but sort of like carefree, but always know that there's always going to be parts of life that are scary. And the point of that was like, that was all instrumental as well. So how the fuck do I explain this with just guitar melody? So that was really different.
That's a complicated thing to do. It really is. That's something I've tried to do, and to varying degrees of success. Is tried to exercise certain things, certain emotions, certain viewpoints on things. That's something I've done too. Like I said, varying degrees of success. Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, and I applaud you for doing that, because I think that your solos and lead work is just full of emotion. And it's great, and I wish I was capable of doing that as a guitar player.
Well, you're probably capable of things on guitar that I can't do. I have a friend who's very into jazz, and we literally call him like Jazzman Dan. And it's like, he dresses like a jazz man. He's all like, fedora and waistcoat, and he's all retro, and he collects vinyls, and he loves it.
Shout out Jazzman Dan.
Yay, Jazzman Dan.
Shout out Jazzman Dan.
I hope you're listening. Yeah. Woo. He is very much into his retro stuff, and he collects vinyls, and whenever we hang out, he's like, oh, Phil, can you show me how to do, like, tapping one day? Can you show me how to do, like, sweep arpeggios? And I'm like, if you show me how to do that crazy chord progression from, like, that Wes Montgomery lick that I don't understand. Like, yeah, sure. Because he'll do all these chords I don't understand, and he'll do things and like, oh, this is a, just a descending lick of diatonic descending down on whole steps of a raised fourth. And I'm like, yeah. Cool. And I'm just like,
of course.
Everyone knows that. Well, you don't know this? But he's always like, I wish I could do what you do with the whammy bar and all the two-handed tapping stuff, and you do all the Steve Vai things. And I'm like, well, just, we'll trade. And every time we like hang out, then it's like, I'll teach him something and he teaches me something. So like I said, there's probably things that you do in your band dynamic, and like maybe your brain and the way that you create things, both of you, is going to be completely different to whatever I will come up with, ever. Your feelings and your thoughts, as well as your genetic makeup and all these other things to do with your your perceptive and the way that you sort of perceive the world will ultimately change the way that you write compared to what I write. And that's true for everything. So it's not about idea of it. There was a moment today, it's funny enough, speaking about that. And I'm glad that you actually mentioned the idea of, like, you know, like, I wish I could do that. There was a guy on my course today, and he wrote this song, and he wanted me to just, like, can you just play this one little riff for me today? And I'm like, just play this throughout the song. And it was like 4 notes, just like bump, ba-dum, bump. And it's just that, like, in the background of the song. And I said, like, do you want me to change it up? I said, like, because I'm not saying that's like a boring part or anything, but if you want me to change it up in the chorus or, like, you know, do something different with it, I can do that. And he was like, yeah, I know it's beneath you because you're really great at stuff. And I said, no, I said, don't you dare say that. I said, don't you, no one is above or below anyone here. And he was like, yeah, but I just know that you do all these, like, crazy songs and stuff and, like, all this stuff. And, like, this must be really boring. I said, it's not about that. I said, if it's important to you, then it's important to me. So this idea of saying, like, oh, you know, someone's better at you than something or someone's worse than you. It's like everyone who's ever picked up an instrument is always trying to better themselves. Because, like I said, we have people come in and, like, their hands are shaking, learning chords and stuff, and they don't know how to play with other people. And this idea of, like, oh, I wish I could do that. And I'm just thinking, like, well, you either put the time in like I did, or you find your own way to get there, you know? Because my way was rooted in 10, 15-hour playing days, you know, where I'd be, like, taking my guitar to school, and I'd be, like, you know, sandwich in one hand and doing, like, left-handed exercises with the other, and, like, guitar in the bed with me, and, like, I'd wake up with, like, string marks on my face.
We had a guy in our school that did that named and everybody really respected his dedication to the craft. So it's definitely commemorable.
I didn't get that. I was just like, where do you bring that in for? Oh, can you play this song? Oh, do you know this song by Taylor Swift? Oh, do you know this song? Do you know that? And I'm just like, I just wanted to just sit on the wall with my little mini amp and just shred, just, like, make nonsense just for myself.
Yeah.
And, like, it just turns, no one respected it. They were just like, oh, this just, you're just making noise, it's fine. Oh, do you know this one song? Or do you know that Bullet for My Valentine song, the one that goes do 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 do? And I'm like, no, I don't. What's that? What, like, I don't know.
The one that's like do da da do da.
The one that goes do 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 do, and I'm like,
Yeah,
maybe.
Diggity bow, diggity bow.
You know that one that's like, dude, how'd you spell? I don't know. I got writer's block. I don't know how to write stuff like that. Background bassist Chewbacca. You know? So,
Right.
so where do we go from here now? You said you had 10 sheets worth of notes and questions. What comes next?
Honestly, I feel like you've answered a lot of the
Honestly,
questions.
you answered a lot of the questions without me even having to ask them. This flowed so nicely.
Oh, wow. That's really reassuring. Thank you.
No, you crushed it, Phil. I think we're approaching really the end of the podcast here. I think we're about to wrap up on our time constraints. But before we get to that point, I have the idea of doing just a quick, if you have a minute or 2 minutes to say anything that you want to the world as a musician, as an artist, as an individual who clearly has so much empathy for the people around him and the people of the world in general, what is it that you would like to say?
If I could say one thing to anyone that's ever struggling with anything, it's that pain is a universal thing. And we like to think that, like, our pain is personal. I write about my pain, and I'll express my pain because it's so unique and no one will understand it. And if I can just connect to one person, then gosh golly gee, then it'll all be worth it. But, like, that's not a very practical way of doing things. So for me, I would just want to say that to the world, that understand that pain and love and weakness and strength are all valid, and have this thing of, like, it's a yin and yang of life, that, you know, monsters and angels are always going to come through every part of your life, and everything is temporary. Love is temporary, hate is temporary, and you're going to have these moments where you're not going to understand everything, and not everyone's going to understand you. And that's totally fine, because it's about your journey as an individual and how you will perceive the world and what you leave behind. And some people leave behind nothing. Some people will especially in this day and age of social media and just sharing everything, is like, hey, here's a camera on your phone, perform forever for no reason. And I find that's very worrying. And there's some people that want to do that because they think that will give them a sense of, I guess,
validation.
Not so much validation, but like, this is how I connect with people. This is my breakfast. This is what I do. We're going to go shopping today. And if people want to be a voyeuristic person in life, that's totally fine. But I don't think people should ever forget that it's very important, like I said before, to foster joy and optimism. And because I remember once just thinking, like, if you're cynical about the world and the way that it looks and everything being so hopeless, like I said, with you guys over there, with Trump and all the people way over here and the idea of the 1% and, you know, all these political things that cause constantly infighting, if you understand that, like, if you just live on this cynical part of the world, then they win. Because you're not going to do anything to change the world. So I think even if you're doing if you're coming from an expressive point of like doing the like most hardcore metal, the most like thrashy, fuck you sort of stuff, you know, where like you were just like full on raging. As long as it's coming from a place of understanding compassion and this idea of like loving all that you can. Everything you can possibly share it, because it's like I said, it's temporary. So we're only here briefly. So why would you want to experience anything else than joy?
Right.
Well, that's very beautiful, Phil.
Thank you very much.
And hey, I'm sorry that we're approaching that time.
No, this is like an hour 4. I literally thought this was going to be like a 20-minute thing, and I'm just like, I thought you guys were going to be like, when does he shut up? He's talking about all this thing with like...
No, you've done great.
You've done great, man. We have been enchanted by you.
Oh, God.
It's been a very good conversation. We appreciate it. Sid, I think I've heard everything I need to hear. It's been a good experience. If there's anything else that you want to end off or lead with, be my guest.
I just want to say, Phil, thanks for coming out. This has been an enlightening and uplifting experience.
Thank you.
Cheers, friend.
Thank you very much. This was different. I was gonna say, do you have any more quickfire questions about like gear or production stuff? Because I literally thought that's what we were. I literally thought this was gonna be like 15 minutes of like, oh yeah, I run my stuff through this and I do this with an EQ and I do this.
Gearhead stuff.
Here's the way that I look at it, Bill. There are plenty of people we will talk to who really only have gear and production, things of those nature to talk about, because that's just, you know, their preference. In your case, I think we've been left off with a much more, in some ways, interesting podcast, because we've got to have a conversation with someone who not only puts so much thought into their concepts on their album, but also puts so much thought into their fellow human, the lives around them, and not only how to better themselves, but how to spread that positivity. And honestly, I'm happy leaving it at that, because like I said, I don't think we're going to get many people who are able to conversate like you were able to.
Well,
and I think that makes this a very unique episode in our small series of podcasts so far.
I agree completely. This has been a great time.
I'm not crying right now. I'm not gonna cry.
Oh, Phil, don't cry. If I was there,
better not, because then I'm gonna start crying, and then Kit's gonna start crying.
Seriously, my face is salty right now. Like, oh my God, because like I don't get to sort of talk this way with most people, and it's like when you like said like, hey, do you want to come on a podcast, I literally thought we were going to talk about like, so tell us about your gear, and it's like, oh yeah, I do this with a parametric EQ, and I do this for a de-esser going into a multiplier of this by times 8, and then I take a scoop out a face part of the bass line so it makes room for the bass and make sure the mid-range is your friend, and then I crush it at 4-1.
Right,
and then I do this with a delay of like 37 point thing, and then I make sure I round that off with a pre-delay of 370 so it doesn't sound like you're just like smacking like the treble at the wall. And then I make sure to not use too much gain when I'm doing anything with guitars, and then if I'm doing this, make sure that like the mid-range doesn't clash with any of the synth stuff on a left channel to right channel basis. And if it's going to be in stereo, that you make sure that you parametrically do this and this. And I'm like, oh my God, I had all these things planned today, and I just basically went the vulnerable route of just saying about like, oh, these songs are about like how I just want to love. I just want to love people.
Right.
It went off the rails in the most beautiful way.
Absolutely.
It really did, man.
It was an explosion of beautiful chaos, and that's really what we were looking for here.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
And hey, we're gonna keep pumping out episodes. maybe some point in the future we can get you back on when you release more stuff. We
Absolutely.
can talk gear then if you want
Oh,
to.
that would be
We
great.
can talk more stuff.
That would be really
Yeah,
nice. I'd enjoy that.
It'd be great. Thank you so much for coming out, Phil.
Absolutely no problem. This has been a pleasure.